Hey there, you looking kinda cute. Don't forget to subscribe and check out my other socials for more. Enjoy. They were walking along the river, the city lights reflecting off the water, when she suddenly stopped. "There's something I need to tell you," she said, her heart pounding. Her date looked at her curiously, waiting. Taking a deep breath, she began to explain. She told her about waking up one day and realizing she was changing, about the confusion and fear, about the bizarre reality of no one else seeming to notice. As she spoke, she watched her date's face carefully, waiting for the disbelief, the rejection, but instead she saw only compassion and interest. When she finished, there was a moment of silence. Then her date reached out and took her hand. "Thank you for sharing that with me," she said softly. "I can't imagine how difficult and confusing that must have been for you." Tears welled up in her eyes, overwhelmed by the simple act of being believed, of having her experience acknowledged. That night marked a turning point. For the first time since her transformation began, she felt truly seen and accepted for who she was, past and present. As their relationship deepened, she found herself opening up more and more. She shared her journal entries, her old photos, the remnants of her former life. Her girlfriend listened with patience and understanding, never judging, always supportive. With this newfound acceptance, she felt emboldened to reach out to some of her old friends, including Solomon. She invited him over to her new place, determined to finally have an honest conversation about what had happened. When Solomon arrived, she took a deep breath and launched into her story. She explained about the changes, about her confusion and fear, about her frustration that no one seemed to notice. As she spoke, she watched Solomon's face carefully. To her amazement, she saw a flicker of recognition in his eyes. I think I remember," he said slowly, brow furrowed in concentration. "It's like there was a fog and now it's lifting. I can see it now, how you've changed. How did I not notice before?" Tears of relief streamed down her face as Solomon pulled her into a hug. Finally, someone from her old life could see her for who she truly was. In the days and weeks that followed, she had similar conversations with other friends and family members. Some remembered immediately, others took time to process. But slowly, surely, the fog seemed to lift from everyone's eyes. It was as if by fully accepting herself, by speaking her truth out loud, she had broken some sort of spell. The world could finally see her as she truly was. As she reflected on her journey, she realized that the transformation had been about more than just physical changes. It had been about finding the courage to be her authentic self, about learning to embrace change and uncertainty. She thought back to that first morning, waking up and noticing the subtle changes in her body, how far she had come since then, how much she had grown and learned. Looking in the mirror now, she saw not just her physical reflection, but the strength and resilience that had brought her to this point. She saw a woman who had faced the impossible and come out stronger on the other side. With a smile, she turned away from the mirror and stepped out into the world, ready to embrace whatever new adventures life had in store. She was who she was meant to be, and that was beautiful. As the years passed, she found herself reflecting more and more on her transformation. What had once been a source of confusion and fear had become an integral part of her identity, a unique experience that had shaped her in ways she was still discovering. She started a support group for others who had gone through similar experiences, creating a safe space for people to share their stories and find understanding. It was healing, not just for those who attended, but for her as well. Each shared story, each nod of recognition helped to validate her own journey. Her relationship with her girlfriend deepened, evolving into a partnership built on trust, understanding, and mutual growth. They moved in together, creating a home that was a testament to both their individual journeys and their shared path. Solomon remained a constant in her life, their friendship stronger now for having weathered such an extraordinary experience. They often reminisced about the early days of her transformation, marveling at the strange fog that had seemed to cloud everyone's perception. As she approached the 5-year anniversary of her transformation, she decided to write a book about her experience. It was a cathartic process, revisiting those early days of confusion and fear, tracing her journey of self-discovery and acceptance. The book, when published, struck a chord with readers around the world. She received countless messages from people who saw themselves in her story, who had felt alone in their own experiences of change and transformation. One day, while doing a book signing, a young person approached her table, clutching a copy of her book tightly. "Your story changed my life," they said, voice trembling slightly. "I thought I was going crazy, that no one else could understand what I was going through. But reading your book, it was like you were describing my own experience." She reached out and took the young person's hand, feeling a surge of emotion. "You're not alone," she said softly. "And you're not crazy. Your experience is valid, and you are so, so brave." As she signed the book, adding a personal message of encouragement, she felt a profound sense of purpose. Her transformation, as difficult and confusing as it had been, had led her to this moment. It had given her the ability to reach out and touch the lives of others who were struggling, to offer hope and understanding. That night, as she lay in bed next to her girlfriend, she found herself overwhelmed with gratitude for the journey she had been on, for the person she had become, for the life she now led. "What are you thinking about?" her girlfriend asked, noticing her pensive mood. She turned, smiling softly in the darkness. "Just everything. How far I've come. How lucky I am to be here, now, with you." Her girlfriend pulled her close, placing a gentle kiss on her forehead. "I'm the lucky one," she whispered. As she drifted off to sleep, she felt a sense of peace settle over her. The journey wasn't over. Life, after all, was a constant process of growth and change. But she was ready for whatever came next, secure in who she was and surrounded by love and understanding. The transformation that had once seemed like a curse had become her greatest gift, allowing her to touch lives and make a difference in ways she never could have imagined. And as she slept, she dreamed of all the possibilities that still lay ahead, all the lives she might yet touch, all the ways she might continue to grow and change. In her dreams, she saw herself standing on a stage, sharing her story with thousands. She saw herself mentoring young people going through their own transformations, offering the guidance and support she had so desperately needed at the beginning of her journey. She dreamed of writing more books, of starting a foundation to support research into experiences like hers, of traveling the world to connect with others who had gone through similar transformations. But most of all, she dreamed of a world where change was embraced, where people were free to become their truest selves without fear or judgment, a world where transformations like hers were celebrated rather than feared or ignored. As morning light began to filter through the curtains, she stirred, the dreams slowly fading but leaving behind a sense of purpose and possibility. She opened her eyes, taking in the familiar contours of her bedroom, the warm presence of her girlfriend beside her. And as she did every morning, she took a moment to simply be grateful for who she was, for the journey that had brought her to this point. Slipping out of bed, she padded to the bathroom, pausing as always to study her reflection in the mirror. The face that looked back at her was so different from the one she had known before her transformation, yet it felt more authentically her than her old face ever had. She traced the curve of her cheek, the line of her jaw, marveling as she often did at the changes she had undergone. But now, instead of fear or confusion, she felt only acceptance and love for the person she had become. As she went about her morning routine, she found herself humming softly, filled with a quiet joy. Today was just another day, but it was also a gift, another opportunity to live fully as herself, to make a difference in the world, to love and be loved. She thought about the support group meeting she would be leading that evening, about the young people who would be there looking for guidance and understanding. She thought about the outline for her next book, waiting on her laptop for her to flesh out. and she thought about Solomon, who was coming over for dinner that night. Their friendship had evolved into something even stronger after her revelation, a bond forged by shared experience and mutual understanding. As she finished getting ready for the day, her girlfriend emerged from the bedroom, still sleepy-eyed and tousle-haired. She couldn't help but smile at the sight, her heart swelling with love. "Good morning, beautiful," she said. Her girlfriend smiled. "Good morning yourself. You're up early." She shrugged, still smiling. "Couldn't sleep. Too excited about life, I guess." Her girlfriend laughed, a sound that never failed to fill her with joy. "Only you could be excited about a regular Tuesday morning." But that was just it, she thought as they moved to the kitchen to start breakfast together. There was no such thing as a regular morning anymore. Every day was an adventure, an opportunity, a gift. As they ate breakfast together, chatting about their plans for the day, she felt a familiar surge of gratitude for this life, for this love, for the journey that had brought her here. As she stepped out into the morning air, she took a deep breath, savoring the scent of blooming flowers and freshly cut grass. The neighborhood was just beginning to stir, with early risers heading out for jogs or walking their dogs. She waved to Mrs. Thompson across the street, who was tending to her prized rose bushes. Her phone buzzed in her pocket, and she pulled it out to see a message from one of the members of her support group. It was a young person she had been mentoring, someone who was just beginning their own journey of transformation.
"I did it,"
the message read.
"I told my parents last night. It was scary, but they were so supportive. Thank you for giving me the courage to be myself."
She felt tears prick at the corners of her eyes as she read the message.
This was why she did what she did, why she shared her story so openly.
To know that her experience could help others find the strength to live authentically, it was more rewarding than she could have ever imagined. She typed out a quick reply, filled with encouragement and pride, before slipping her phone back into her pocket and continuing her walk to the local cafe where she often wrote. The bell above the door jingled as she entered, and the barista behind the counter looked up with a smile.
"The usual?"
he asked, already reaching for a mug. She nodded, returning his smile. "Please, and maybe one of those blueberry muffins, too." As she waited for her order, she glanced around the cafe. It was quiet at this hour, just a few other patrons scattered at tables, most engrossed in laptops or books. This had become her sanctuary over the past few years, a place where she could write and think in peace. Coffee and muffin in hand, she made her way to her favorite corner table, the one with the perfect view of the street outside. She pulled out her laptop and opened the document containing the outline for her new book. This one was different from her previous works. While her first book had been a memoir detailing her personal journey of transformation, this new project was more ambitious. She was exploring the concept of identity and change on a broader scale, interviewing people from all walks of life about their experiences of transformation, both physical and emotional. She had already conducted dozens of interviews, each one leaving her in awe of the human capacity for growth and resilience. There was the woman who had lost her sight in her 30s and had to rebuild her entire life. The man who had left a high-powered corporate job to become an organic farmer. The teenager who had found the courage to come out as non-binary in a small, conservative town. Each story was unique, yet there was a common thread running through them all. The idea that change, while often frightening, could also be a catalyst for profound personal growth and self-discovery. As she began to type, weaving together these diverse experiences into a cohesive narrative, she felt that familiar spark of excitement. This book had the potential to touch even more lives than her first, to reach people who might not see themselves in her specific experience, but could relate to the universal themes of change and self-discovery. The morning slipped away as she wrote, pausing only to sip her coffee or take bites of her muffin. Before she knew it, the lunch crowd was starting to filter in, the quiet atmosphere of the cafe giving way to the bustle of the midday rush. She saved her work and closed her laptop, stretching out the stiffness in her shoulders. As she gathered her things, her phone buzzed again. This time it was Solomon. "Don't forget, I'm bringing that new recipe I've been working on for dinner tonight. Hope you're ready for a culinary adventure." She chuckled as she read the message. Solomon's enthusiasm for cooking had been a recent development, one that had resulted in some truly memorable meals, for better or worse. "Can't wait," she typed back. "Should I have the fire extinguisher ready?" His reply came almost instantly. "Very funny. Just for that, I'm adding extra chili peppers." She laughed out loud, drawing curious glances from nearby tables. As she left the cafe, waving goodbye to the barista, she felt a warmth that had nothing to do with the sunshine. This was her life now, filled with laughter, love, purpose, and yes, the occasional culinary disaster courtesy of Solomon. As she walked home, she found herself reflecting on the upcoming evening. Dinner with Solomon had become a weekly tradition, a time for them to catch up and maintain the close bond they had developed. It was a tangible reminder of how far they had come, from the confusion and unspoken tension of her early transformation to the open, honest friendship they now shared. She thought about how she would share the progress on her new book with him, how he would listen with genuine interest and offer insightful comments. She thought about how they might end up talking late into the night, as they often did, about life and change and the nature of identity. And she thought about how grateful she was to have him in her life, to have someone who had known her before and after, who had seen her at her most vulnerable and still chose to stand by her side. As she rounded the corner onto her street, she saw her neighbor, Mr. Garcia, struggling with some heavy-looking grocery bags. Without hesitation, she jogged over to help him. "Let me give you a hand with those, Mr. Garcia," she said, reaching for one of the bags. The elderly man smiled gratefully. "Oh, thank you, dear. These old bones aren't what they used to be." As they walked together towards his house, chatting amiably about the unseasonably warm weather and Mr. Garcia's prize-winning tomatoes, she felt a sense of belonging wash over her. This was her community, her home. These were people who saw her for who she truly was, who had accepted her without question. After helping Mr. Garcia with his groceries and promising to stop by later in the week to help him with some gardening, she finally made it back to her own home. As she unlocked the door, she paused for a moment, taking in the sight of the little house she shared with her girlfriend. It wasn't anything fancy, a modest 2-bedroom with a small yard, but to her it was perfect. It was a space they had created together, filled with love and laughter and the promise of a shared future. She stepped inside, closing the door behind her. The house was quiet, her girlfriend still at work for a few more hours. But even in the silence, she could feel the warmth of their shared life surrounding her. She made her way to the kitchen, deciding to get a head start on preparing for dinner with Solomon. As she began to chop vegetables and marinate chicken, just in case Solomon's culinary experiment didn't pan out, she found herself humming softly. The tune was familiar, a song she had loved in her previous life but had almost forgotten. It felt right, somehow, to be rediscovering it now. Like so many aspects of her old self, it hadn't been lost in her transformation, merely transformed along with her. Thanks for watching. Don't forget to check out my other socials if you want more wonderful content, early access, behind the scenes, and more. All links down below.